The world seemed to stand still the moment Ibrahim Traoré stood on that stage, his voice resonating through the vast hall of leaders. "Today I declare that Nnamdi Kanu is Africa's true leader," he said, his words carrying the weight of a continent. The room fell into stunned silence. But across the globe, a far more powerful man watched. His face turning redder than the flames of a revolution, President Bola Tinubu. The stage was set for a clash that would forever alter the course of African history. Introduction and setup. It was a humid afternoon in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, where the air seemed thick with anticipation. The scent of damp earth mixed with the heat of the sun as Ibrahim Traoré, a young and resolute leader, stood tall against the overwhelming pressures of the political elite. His rise from military officer to the president of Burkina Faso had been nothing short of miraculous. But this moment, this declaration, was the greatest test of his courage. Yet, as he prepared to speak, the weight of history pressed down upon him. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic clicking of the microphones being adjusted. His hand clenched around the podium, fingers white with the effort. Behind him stood a tapestry of African leaders, their eyes fixed on him. His voice echoed out like a challenge to the very foundation of power. Nnamdi Kanu is the true leader of Africa. His spirit of resistance and independence is unmatched. The time has come for Africa to follow its true champion, Traoré declared. The room erupted in a mixture of disbelief and awe. Some faces turned pale, others flushed with anger. But none was as affected as the man in the farthest corner of the room, President Bola Tinubu of Nigeria. Conflict or a challenge introduced. The very air seemed to thicken with tension as Ibrahim's words reverberated through the hall. President Tinubu's eyes, once filled with calm, now gleamed with a simmering fury. He had always considered himself the true leader of Africa, someone who could sway nations, control economies, and maintain power over the entire continent. But here in front of the world's eyes, Traoré had dared to challenge that very notion. It wasn't just the audacity of the claim, it was the implications. Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra IPOB, had been imprisoned by the Nigerian government. A man whose actions and voice had called for the liberation of his people. For Traoré to publicly endorse him as the true leader of Africa was a declaration of war in open defiance of the powers that be in Nigeria. Midpoint revelation or twist. As the hours passed, news of Traoré's declaration spread across the globe, fueling a fire that could not be easily extinguished. Political analysts debated, diplomats scrambled to align their positions, and citizens across Africa began to question their loyalties. But it wasn't until the evening that the world learned of the secret meeting between Traoré and Kanu. That would forever change the course of African politics. It had been a quiet affair, held in the shadows of Burkina Faso's presidential palace. A meeting with no official records, no cameras. Only the two men, united by a shared vision of a liberated Africa. They spoke of unity, strength, and the breaking of chains that had bound the continent for centuries. But what they did next, what they whispered to each other in that dimly lit room, would send shockwaves through every African nation. Had promised Kanu that he would support him, not just as a political ally, but as the beacon of hope for Africa's future. And in return, Kanu had entrusted him with his most sacred plan, the creation of a new African confederation, one that would rise above the corruption, the neocolonialism, and the exploitation that had plagued the continent for generations. Climax emotional breakthrough. But back in Nigeria, Tinubu wasn't the only one rattled by Traoré's declaration. The people of Nigeria, tired of years of corruption and failed promises, began to rally. They, too, began to see Nnamdi Kanu not as a criminal, but as a hero and icon of resistance against the old guard. Tinubu's government, once secure in its power, now found itself teetering on the edge of collapse. As the situation in Nigeria became more volatile, Traoré's phone rang late one night. It was a call from Nnamdi Kanu himself, his voice filled with emotion. "They are coming for me, Ibrahim," Kanu said. "But the people of Africa are waking up. Your words have sparked something we cannot stop." Traoré knew what had to be done. The world's attention was now on them. Africa once divided, and manipulated, was uniting in a way no one had ever imagined. But even in the face of such monumental change, Traoré understood that the greatest battle was yet to come. Resolution and quiet closure. The day came when the world held its breath, waiting for the final confrontation. The international press gathered, cameras flashing, journalists murmuring. But it wasn't the leaders of the world who would make the final decision, it was the people. Across Africa, from the markets of Cairo to the streets of Lagos, a movement was rising. It was no longer about one leader or one nation, it was about the people of Africa reclaiming their destiny. In a final, unexpected twist, President Tinubu stepped onto a live broadcast, his face weary, his voice calm. He had no choice but to admit it. "I cannot deny the people's will," he said. "The winds of change are unstoppable." And in that moment, a new Africa was born. The chains were breaking, and the voice of the people could no longer be silenced. Nnamdi Kanu, though still imprisoned, had become the symbol of Africa's true leader, respected, revered, and destined to guide the continent into a new era. Call to action if this story touched your heart. Consider subscribing for more inspiring tales of hope, healing, and unexpected kindness. Hit the like button and share this with someone who needs it today.